Okay, y'all, I'm walking here. This is another walking video. And I'm going to get to the final in my series of 3 videos on the consideration of the full Bret Easton Ellis catalog up till now. But I wanted to do this right now because it's on my mind. I've been reading this book called The Devil in the White City. It's a well-written book, and I recommend it, except I think it maybe is a little too long. But it's seldom that you find a history book written today, a book about a prior time in history written today that doesn't have all of this annoying, woke-ish kind of stuff. I'm sorry that the word woke it's overused, I know, but the thing is, most of the time you find books written about like stuff that happened in the 19th century, and there has to be some passage about all of the, about how white men are bad, controlled society, and there were all these marginalized groups that were kept down, and like this book really just avoids all of that. It totally avoids it, from what I can tell, unless there's something in the last few chapters that doesn't, or where there's a lapse. But my impression is that the author, Eric Larson is his name, I believe, he just doesn't seem to be interested in any of that stuff. He just wants to tell the story of what happened, and that's the real subject of this video. The question of what really happened is what comes up for me when I looked at stuff about the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. This is a subject that the Tartaria people are all over. They're all over this, and some of y'all are probably out there. I imagine. I don't know about the Tartaria mud flood theory myself. It's certainly interesting, but I don't know whether I believe it or not. But when I looked at stuff, when I went on YouTube and looked up videos about the 1893 World's Fair, you pretty much couldn't get away from the Tartaria thesis, whether it was people in the comments or whether it was just the subject of the video itself. It seems like this Tartaria theory has really taken over, at least amongst people who are interested in the topic of the 1893 World's Fair. If YouTube is any indication, there aren't all that many people who are into the official story of what happened with that event. So let me talk about that for a second, because I as I said, I have some trouble with the Tartaria theory as it applies here. That isn't to say that the Tartaria people don't make interesting points, but here's where it stands. So the book is, well, it's about a couple different things. One is the how the 1893 World's Fair came to Chicago, all the planning that went into it, the people who were involved with it, their relationships with one another, how it was this major event in America, and people in Chicago were excited to have it in their city, and people in other places in the country, especially New York, thought, what are these these rednecks, these yahoos out in Chicago? Why should they get the World's Fair when all the culture is really here in New York? So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's covered as far as that goes. But the book is also partly about the mass murderer, the notorious serial killer H.H. Holmes, who lived in Chicago at around that time and was murdering lots of people, and nobody seemed to notice for a long time. He got away with it for a really long time. So these two kinds of things, that the author describes it as the white city versus the black city. The white city is what they called the exhibit, the grounds of the World's Fair was the white city. Everything is painted white. And the Tartaria people, when they examine the photographs of all the buildings and how everything looked in the white city for this World's Fair in Chicago in 1893, they point out things like, look at all this detail. Look at this, these were all these buildings that seem to be made of quartz and marble. You're telling me that people with horse and buggy technology built this in 3 years? Look at, and it's so majestic. It's so the buildings, the sophistication of it all is way beyond what people could have built at the time with just horses and buggies. And of course, the Tartaria thesis is that that what's really going on is this was, I guess they say it was always there, or has been there for centuries. The stuff that was supposedly built in 3 years, starting in around 1890, was actually there for a long time. And there was a city in Chicago for a long time, run by the Tartarian Empire, and the Tartarian Empire was this majestic, sophisticated empire that had access to advanced technology, and so they had all of these classical looking buildings all over the world, and so the thesis is, as far as I can understand it, that whoever is in charge of things now, or after Tartaria fell, because of the mud flood, I think. When you hear mud flood, that means Tartaria. It's very interesting. That one word signifies mud. If you say mud flood, I guess that's 2 words. It's like a compound word, because it's written as if it were one word, 2 words pushed together. But mud flood signifies, I think, what happened to Tartaria, or some, the nefarious order that now rules the world took over, and they've been phasing out Tartarian technology, and And so the thesis is that this was always there. It wasn't built for the World's Fair in 1893. It was there for centuries beforehand. And the authorities just used this event of the World's Fair to put it on display, to say something like, look, we've made these, like to claim these advancements had been made when they really hadn't been made. And then a few years later, I think in 1906, there was a fire that burned down much of the White City, even though a lot of it's made of stone, and you would think would not be susceptible to burning. Of course, that calls to mind certain fires that are raging, that have been raging these days, and like the fire in Hawaii, the wildfires in Hawaii, the wildfires in California, the strange properties that they seem to have in a lot of ways. People wonder if it's if it was a planned thing. But this is what they said. This is the thesis with the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, according to the believers in the Tartaria theory. Now, what I have trouble with, I mean, I don't know, I can't really say, I can't really, it's not that I'm inclined to challenge them, but if I were inclined to challenge them, I wouldn't know what to say, in response to there's no way this could have been built in 3 years with the technology that they had in 1890. I don't really have an answer to that question, or to that challenge. But what strikes me as really strange, and what I have a problem with, I have a problem resolving, is they say that this other stuff that's been said about how everything came to be, all of this book uses a ton of secondary sources, of people's letters and newspapers and other stuff that was around in that day. And there's a ton of it. It's not like it wasn't a documented event. The building of the White City, the exhibit that was the World's Fair in 1893 in Chicago. It's heavily documented, and I just have a hard time understanding if the Tartaria myth is true. I'm not putting it down by calling it a myth. I'm saying, let's say thesis. If the Tartaria thesis is true, then all of these secondary sources were just created out of whole cloth. And how do they do that? Like, how do you, and why? Well, I guess the why is to fool everybody, right? I just have a hard time believing that you've got this wealth of secondary sources, enough to write a fairly large book out of, and all these correspondences between these people who were involved in the event, their names, the names of their wives, the names of their children, where they lived. It's not like there's extensive material there. There's extensive detail from many different sources. Not, it's not sketchy, it's not scant. And so what I guess what the Tartaria believers would just say, oh, well, that's all just made up. But I just have a hard time understanding who gets assigned to, to pretend to be this guy or that guy, or one of the hundreds of guys who were involved in the planning of the World's Fair, according to official documents, right? Who took on the role? Who was assigned the role to just forge all of these documents and create all of these people out of whole cloth that either didn't really exist, or if they did exist, didn't really do the things that they are claiming to have done, or didn't actually write these letters where they say, oh, we're having so much trouble. This is such a calamitous thing. Last night there was, rains that shook that knocked the roof off of this one building, and the workers are demanding higher wages or they're going to strike, and all this stuff. Which seems to detail what they claim actually happened, which is that this was an event, this was something. The buildings that were part of this white city were indeed built in that span of time. There's so much documentation, and it's just hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that all of this documentation is made up, falsified, but was somehow, so elaborately falsified, so convincingly falsified that they pulled out all the stops. I have a hard time. That strains my sense of credulity. I have a hard time believing that could really be the case. And I have not heard, again, I haven't sampled everything that the people with the Tartaria thesis have ever said, or all of the videos that they've ever made on YouTube, put on YouTube or elsewhere. But I haven't heard any of them take this on, and this seems like a project you have to take this on, because if settled history, quote unquote, is a certain way, or tells us these things happen this way, that way, this way, that way, then the burden of proof is on you. If you're saying no, it didn't really happen that way, then the burden of proof is on you to say, how was all of this wealth of how and why, and who was involved in this entire wealth of documentation of this event? How did they go about doing it? When did they do it? Somebody needs to cover that. It's not. I don't think it's not enough to just say, look at this building. Look at these buildings. How can we believe this was built in 3 years with 1890s technology? That just doesn't make sense. Okay, I get what you're saying. I don't know. Again, I don't know well enough to know whether the points you're making are worthy or not, but they're interesting points. But where are the again? If you're out to, I hate to use the word debunk, but that is what, if you're the people who propose an alternative to the official story, they're debunking the official story. If like in the case of something like 9/11, you have explanations for things. You have accounts for things. What happened on the fourth plane. I don't want to go into the detail. I don't want to get into the weeds with it here. but I'm just citing 9/11 as a contrast. Like, the reason why I find 9/11 revisionism so compelling and so convincing is because they give explanations for things that are the things that the official story can't explain. And the Tartaria thesis doesn't give explanation. Well, it gives an explanation, but the explanation is that that all we know about history is wrong and we've been lied to, and there was this Tartarian empire. I mean, it's a big leap, is what I'm saying. It's a big leap to go from, these buildings look too well built, to too sophisticated to be able to have been constructed in a time frame. To go from that to what really happened is, this world conquering civilization that eventually fell into disfavor or was overthrown, and now the people in charge are just lying and making up stuff about historical events. Like, you gotta do more than that to be convincing. When you have this wealth of documentation, you got to do something with that, and that's what I find lacking in a lot of what the Tartaria people are claiming. So, anyone want to respond in any way to anything I've said here? Welcome your thoughts.